Thank you, Mr Taylor. Are you familiar with the extensive damage to the banks of the Murray River around the Barmah Choke?
Yes, I am.
Okay, that's good. We won't need to table that then. It's caused by non-stop water flows, and the picture that I was going to show you, if necessary, could have been taken anywhere along about 100 kilometres of the river. The damage is so pervasive. The choke is being eroded by combined environmental, conveyance and irrigation flows. What's the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder doing about this damage?
Thanks, Senator. As you said, it's a combination of all the water in the river that's causing the bank erosion there. Mm-hmm. My colleagues from the MDBA may also want to talk about some of the geomorphology that's occurring in the bed of the river there. There's silting in the bed of the river, which is reducing the capacity of that narrow section of the river between Yarrawonga and down to about Barmah. But the main sedimentation's in the Barmah area. And that damage is part of major studies and scientific work going on in that area, trying to work out what's causing it, how it might be remediated, and we're happy to be part of that. I would also like to add that the water that the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder puts through that system there is run counter-cyclical to some of the irrigation demand in the system. We also put water around the choke through some of the forest streams and rivers through that area, and over bank into the forest there that helps de-energise some of that water. By taking some of that pressure off that peak demand season, we think we may actually be mitigating some of the issues that may otherwise be arising in that area.
Before we do things, Senator Hanson and I, we try to get the facts. So we went down the Murray River after hearing of extensive complaints from southern Queensland and then southern New South Wales and northern Victoria. And we went down the Murray, and then when I came back into the Senate, I overflew the whole basin. And the number one thing that I noticed, I picked up in the first 5 minutes of my flight out of Albury heading down the river. The river is incredibly tortuous, incredibly so. And that tells me one thing. The gradient is it's almost flat, and you would know that. And yet the amount of water that's being shoved down that river is just phenomenal, and it's doing this damage. This is the opposite of what an environmental guardian should be doing, in our opinion. So let me continue asking questions. It's just physically impossible to get all that water from the upper Murray downstream to the large corporate plantations and all the environmental water. So this is the fourth estimates that I've asked about environmental damage through the choke. Has the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder, who should be interested in this, or the Murray Darling Basin Authority, who are administering the plan that has caused this damage, done anything to stop this damage? It sounds like you haven't, they're just studying at the moment.
Senator, I think it's fair that certainly the environmental water flows through the choke, as you said, other purposes as well. I might ask the Murray Darling Basin Authority to come forward and talk about what's being done in respect of the choke.
Yep.
Thank you for acknowledging that there is a lot of water going down through there.
Andrew Reynolds, Executive Director, River Management with the Murray Darling Basin Authority. Management of the choke is a significant concern for the authority and how we regulate the river system. As has been pointed out, there are a number of competing demands on the system, delivery of consumptive water for irrigation demands, excuse me, environmental water demands through the system as well. There are a number of, as Mr Taylor said, a number of studies have been underway to understand how the geomorphology of the choke is changing. Certainly sedimentation, which is occurring in the choke, reduces the capacity through there. In terms of the management arrangements there, thank you, we're certainly focusing our system planning on how we move water through the system. We work very, very closely with environmental water holders and irrigation operators in terms of understanding demands, planning our system operations so that we can deliver water to Lake Victoria at varying times throughout the year. We make extensive use of inter-valley transfers from the Goulburn and Murrumbidgee system to also get a different pattern of water through the system to, in part, limit the amount of erosion that occurs. We certainly are working on getting a study underway to understand how we might better utilise Murray irrigation infrastructure, or indeed infrastructure on the Victorian side through the GMID, to also be able to take some of the pressure off the banks through the river system. All of those pieces of work are underway. Some of them we can adapt our operations immediately to try and alleviate some of those concerns. Some of them are longer run pieces of work that will take some time to affect change.
Are there any plans to construct a pipeline or a channel around that Barmah Choke?
No, there's no plans to construct anything in particular. We're looking at a study to optimise how we might utilise existing infrastructure. Certainly looking at whether or not there are other flow paths through the forest where we might be able to use some of the existing outfalls, particularly from the Murray irrigation system, to put water into other smaller creeks to run it past the choke that way. That study may lead to investigation of some enhancements of that system, but we're yet to progress to that stage.
So there's no consideration or idea of a pipeline to get around it or a channel to get around it, because some of the locals are telling us that there are surveyors working in the Barmah overflow, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Certainly there's no significant studies like that around any major bypasses. We've not commissioned any on-ground field surveys or the like, so I'm not quite sure what people have observed, but it's not anything that we've commissioned.
Okay. So the trading of water used to be limited in the Murray Darling Basin, as I understand it, from what I was told by commissioners on the Murray Darling Basin Commission that preceded the Murray Darling Basin Authority, used to be limited to within each valley, within each catchment, and only to a certain extent downstream. Now there can be inter-catchment transfers, inter-valley transfers, and extensive transfers along the river. So we've got a lot of water moving from the northern part of the valley, Murray Valley, down to the upstream part of the valley, down to the large plantations. Wouldn't one option be to stop that trading?
So, Senator Roberts, there is actually a limit on trade from above the choke to below the choke. It's been in place since 2014, and there's no proposal that would be relaxed. That limitation on trade requires that the net volume of water traded downstream is zero. So trade from above the choke to below can only occur if there's been an equivalent volume traded upstream first. And so the total volume of water moving through the choke is unchanged by trade.
Okay. In a meeting that the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder was in, I think you were there, Mr Reynolds, as well, in Parliament House with us in October of 2019 or thereabouts, I was advised that the department is working on a report into water loss from overlanding through the Barmah Forest and has been collecting this data for many years. It's now May 2021, that's almost 2 years later, and this report has not been tabled. Isn't this a critical report for making good decisions about watering the Barmah?
So we have an ongoing program of assessing each and every event where we put water through the forest for environmental water holders' use or indeed for transfers downstream in the rare occasions when that's necessary. We use that work to assess the loss of water or the consumption of water within the forest. That's part of the work that Mr Taylor was talking about earlier in terms of assessing the return flows to the river system. In other words, how much of the environmental water holders' water is consumed in the forest versus how much comes back into the river to be used further downstream for other watering events. That's an ongoing piece of work that will continue, I would imagine, almost indefinitely, because every time you have another event, you have another bit of data to assess the basis on which those losses are assigned. Certainly all of that work is done on the basis of making sure that there is no third-party impact to water availability for other entitlement holders, so we take a conservative approach to those estimates, but we're continually refining them.
Well, maybe I wasn't clear with my communication in the previous question. we were told there was a report coming, and this is almost 2 years later and there's been no report. I would have thought the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder and yourself would be champing at the bit to get that report.
So we have produced reports on losses in terms of losses through the system, and we've just recently provided an update on losses for the last 2 water years. But the work on individual watering events and the development of effectively the loss rates applied to environmental water holdings is ongoing. It's not being reported as a single report. We continue to refine that.
We were told there was a report coming, and there's no report. Are you aware of any report?
There are numbers of pieces of work that have been documented. I'd have to take on notice whether they've been published. It's certainly been shared with states and others involved in that development of those estimates.
So we were told there was a report coming.
Senator Roberts, from my own knowledge, because is it a report about the environmental water or a report about the conveyance losses and use? Because I know in 2019 there was a report on the conveyance and loss through the Barmah area, and I think you just updated that. It was meant to be annual, but 2019 they didn't do one last year.
That's what I'm asking about.
So
into water loss from overlanding through the Barmah.
So that's been done.
That's
2019.
sorry, misunderstood your question. That report was done in 2019, and we've recently, in the last month, published an update that completed the data for the 2019 water year and also reported on last year as well.
Okay,
so that's on our website.
With regard to that then, how much environmental water went into the Barmah in 2020?
I'd have to take on notice the specific number.
Senator Roberts, do you have much more? Because it is lunchtime and
Just have one more question for this
perfect.
stall.
Thank you.
Floodplain harvesting in excess of allowed take deprives the environment of flows needed to keep the river alive, and that means you have to do more with your water than it was intended to do. Is floodplain harvesting in the Northern Basin affecting your environmental watering remit, and is there anything you wish to say on this matter?
Thanks, Senator. There's been quite a bit of discussion with some Northern Victorian irrigators and myself around this issue, and other people across the Southern Connected Basin, and I think there was some conversations around floodplain harvesting over the last 5 years and the potential impact that it may have had on either our resources and other resources in the Southern Connected Basin. And in those conversations, we outlined that over the last 5 years, in 2016 it was a wet year and there was probably significant floodplain harvesting, but had little or minor impact in the south as there was good allocations in that year. 2017 there was good reserves in stocks in the south, and again it probably had little impact upon our resources for environmental water delivery. 2018, 19 and 20, so the remaining 3 years in that period, were probably record droughts in the Northern Basin, and as a consequence there was no water really in the Northern Basin to harvest. So again it probably had little or no impact upon our resources available for environmental water delivery in the Southern Connected Basin. I'd like to add though that the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder intends to put a submission in to the New South Wales Government on the floodplain harvesting process. We're very concerned about ensuring anything that occurs in that space is completely transparent, well measured, high levels of compliance, because in certain flow circumstances it could impact upon flows and could have an impact upon our capacity to deliver water, particularly in some of the Northern Basin, probably more so than it's likely impact in the Southern Basin.
Because as I understand it, before we go to lunch, one final thing, and as I understand it, the people who end up paying ultimately with loss of water are the farmers in Northern Victoria and Southern New South Wales. If someone's going to lose it and water can't come from the Northern Basin, they lose it.
So I guess the impacts of floodplain harvesting, if there's less resource makes it through the flows, any of the reduced allocations as that resource is shared everywhere, is my understanding of it.
Thanks, Chair.